Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, well, tonight we're going to talk about three main things. First of all, we're going to talk about neighborhood planning. So I'm going to turn the time over to Grant Allen, one of our long-range planners, to do that. After that, we will continue our discussion on the matching grant program. And then Stephen and I will give you an update on our code enforcement program. And then the fourth thing we'll do is any concerns that you have coming from your neighborhood districts. Does that sound good for the evening? Yep. So we'll start with Grant. I'll turn the time over to Grant and he will conduct that discussion. So thank you. You're on silent, Grant.
That was getting all the cameras and everything ready to go. Screens sharing, ready to go. Okay, so I think everyone should be able to see that. Ken asked me to join tonight and kind of go through neighborhood planning, what I call a neighborhood planning update. What we're going to kind of go through tonight is a brief history and background. I'm not closely acquainted with all of you, so I did not quite sure of your familiarity with the entire process that we've gone through for this. And we're going to go through, so just a little bit, a brief history background, goals and implementation plan, and then what I call the updates, future updates to the actual neighborhood plans. So moving right along here. Typically, a city is required by state law to have a general plan. And that guide serves as a guide to future land use growth and development decisions. In 2015, around that time, City Planning Division decided to kind of go down to a smaller level than that and create neighborhood plans for the entire city. So the city was split up into several neighborhood groups, and as part of this process, we kind of coupled those together in these neighborhood groups for I think a realistic process timeline for these plans to be done, about 2 plans per year, and it took about 5 years to go through the whole entire city. And so last year we adopted our last 2 plans for 4 neighborhood groups, which is the Sunset Heights East and West, and Lakeview and Cherry Hill. So we finished this 5-year process, and we really used the same process for all of the plans. So there was some continuity for the general plan, because they are all adopted as part of the general plan, as well as kind of a similar format for all the neighborhoods, so that wherever you live, there was a similarity. It also eased the process for staff to work with the neighborhoods and go through that process, I would say, pretty consistently. And that was also created, really interestingly, is that we created these different meetings where a kickoff meeting was created. Those who came to that kickoff meeting, anyone interested to join an advisory committee was asked and invited to do so. And then we had a series of meetings as different city departments where this advisory committee could learn about the city process and what goes behind the city processes, as well as create visions and goals and kind of voice concerns about these different topics. Those were kind of collated and gathered, and developed into these plans. The purpose of the plans was really to voice those concerns, develop those goals and objectives, also create kind of this document similar to the general plan, but specific to the neighborhoods. Hey, you know, what's specific to this neighborhood in terms of transportation, economic development, land use, neighborhood preservation, public works, etc., and also demographics. And then these are, because they're adopted as part of the general plan, these are referred to and will guide city leaders and staff in these decisions, in the future decisions. As all plans aspire to have strong visions and goals, we strive to, but cannot unfortunately solve all the plans, all the issues or concerns all at once. And so that is something that we were mindful of and are always futurely mindful of as well, as we continue to try to move to this next phase of implementation of the goals. So kind of part of this presentation, I wanted to show you, if you don't know where to find them, I wanted to show you that for sure. If you go to orem.org/planning, that is where they live right now. So this is a screenshot of that page, and I'll just go ahead and switch my screen share so that I can show you that page. Before I do that as well, so that's, you see here the URL, orem.org/planning. We've also added this planning, and I spelled it wrong, zoning page that is kind of this living space for all things planning and zoning. And so if you're want a one-stop shop for all the planning and zoning for our planning division, this is a place to come. Now you can get here a few different ways. You can remember this URL. The easiest way is to come first to the main Orem website and scroll down, and there's this nice little icon that they've created here, planning and zoning, and it takes you right there. We've tried to make this really easy. The top 3 boxes are, if you're going to be doing some kind of project, there's the applications and checklists. If you want to find out some information, there's the zoning maps and all the maps. If you want to see what the future plans, master plans, general plan, neighborhood plans, all the long range plans are right here. So most of the information that you can find here. Additionally, there's the city code button here, which will take you down here to these broken down regulations. Hey, you want to build a shed in your backyard? There's a sheds link right there. You want to maybe have some chickens? There's an animals section there. Really popular. You want to add an accessory apartment? There's requirements there. Any typical requirements we've seen, common questions we get, we have those linked here. Additionally, there's contact. If you want to contact one of us, you can contact us this way as well. It's our phone numbers and our email addresses. So we also have some development tracking so you can see what's going on. If you have a question about accessory apartment, you can visit this site here and you can enter an address and see if it's an approved accessory apartment. That is going to be changing this year with the new state law for accessory apartments. And we have the planning calendar, so you can see, hey, I'm concerned about this project. You can view when our next planning commission or city council meetings are. We have current public hearing notices. So if a public hearing has gone out about a project, depending on what type of project it is, we're required to notice it. That's where you can find those. And then another common thing, which we've brought up in this meeting before, how do you report a concern question? And that is right here. So I'd just like to review that. So as you're the representatives of your areas, you can share this with your neighbors and your friends, and so they know where to find this information as well. Long range plans, so you can kind of come back to here. This is that orem.org/planning. And we've got all the adopted neighborhood plans here. And it kind of does the same thing, gives a short kind of background of the neighborhood planning process that we've gone through. and then all of the neighborhood plans here. Now, I won't go painstakingly through all of them tonight because they're all 70, 60, 70 plus pages each of information. So that would, we'd be here till probably tomorrow doing that painstakingly. So I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with your plan, you can pull it up and move through it. And you can see some of the goals and visions as part of each chapter, as well as an implementation guide and almost all the plans. With the last two plans last year, we shifted from an implementation guide to this next section of my presentation. So I'm going to switch back to that really quick. A lot of screen switching here. While I do that, is there any questions so far for me? Let me switch my screen. Technical difficulties, I apologize. I think after a year of Zoom meetings, I'd be a pro at this. Anyways, okay, so implementation. So we're really, what we were tasked with last year from the City Council as well as internal staff was, hey, what's next, for these goals and all this, we've gone through this process to develop these plans. What's next for this? And so we're really trying to shift it into how can we take these goals and go, what can we do with them? And so we first created this website. It's Neighborhood Plan Goals, or actually, sorry, Neighborhood Goals, orem.org/neighborhood goals, where you can find all of the neighborhood goals for the entire city under the 5 categories of the neighborhood plans. Before I go to those, actually, I'll go to those right now, so you can see what those look like. Okay, there we go. So going back, I mentioned before those 5 categories: land use, transportation, economic development, public works, neighborhood preservation. And we actually have a 6th category, which is accomplished. So you pull this up, it's just a comprehensive list so far of all of the goals from the plan. What we're working on to go through as part of this phase of implementation is, I don't know, I'm trying to scroll through that really quickly, but is in each of these subjects to kind of try to collate these goals into like categories. We're also going to be developing a way so that, if you look at this map here, say you live in the Orem North neighborhood and your plan is the Orem North Sharon Park neighborhood plan. We're looking at a way so you can view both types of goals. You can look at all the goals for the entire city, all the neighborhoods, similar categories of, hey, we want to improve, which neighborhoods all said we want to improve, sidewalks, for example. So we're going to try and create a multiple view way. And then also you can click on your neighborhood and you can view the goals specifically. And there will be a link to your neighborhood plan. So we're working on that right now to create that kind of interactive map feature for the neighborhood map for the goals and the plans. And additionally, last year I sat down with Sam Kelly, our city engineer, to go through a lot of the transportation goals are infrastructure improvement related. So implement safe pedestrian crosswalks at busy intersections of schools, such as this school. That's the really trigger right there. So we've gone through painstakingly, gone through all the plan's goals, and we've tried to say, hey, first of all, if any, of these improvements that have been identified in the neighborhood goals, is there already an improvement planned? Is there already a street widening? Is there some kind of road repaving project? Is there already something going to be happening? Because that's low-hanging fruit for us to go and say, hey, it's already going to be doing. There's already a project for this area. Let's see if we can fix this particular item and include it with that. So we're still going through the process of building these lists of, hey, what are some capital improvement projects that the city has an opportunity to allocate funds towards that are like either already identified as improvements, or what are some of these extra improvements, if any, that we can go through and identify and actually mark to do. Some of the other goals, and this is still kind of an ongoing kind of an idea of how to tackle them necessarily, but and this is maybe something at the end I'll kind of ask as a discussion item with all of you, is some of the goals, for example, are the transportation goals are quantitative, sometimes in nature, where we say, hey, it's an actual improvement that can be made. It will require some kind of investment from infrastructure budget, and so that's kind of a quantitative type of goal that has that nature of tied to it. Some of these other goals are very much the opposite, and that's not necessarily the opposite in nature, but in terms of that they're qualitative goals: maintain safe, clean, family-friendly neighborhoods. How do we go about tracking that type of goal, and how do we go about creating these, areas of focus or that link back to these goals? And so that's, I think, a larger discussion that planning staff has had and is still focusing on, of what are things that we can do internally as staff, planning staff, what are things we can do in conjunction with you all. And I've got a few ideas from previous projects and places and things that I've done that I wanted to share with. I'll share a couple of those tonight, and then we can have a discussion about it later. But just to kind of use that as an example of the qualitative nature type of goals that are embedded in these plans, because we do want the neighborhoods in Orem to have, safe, family-friendly neighborhoods. And part of the I would say goal tracking that we're trying to do is, as a goal is considered accomplished, we've made progress towards it. We're going to be doing our best to, I think, best I say, because we're trying. A department like Public Works may do a project and we may not find out about it right away, and so we're going to do our best to see, if we find out about a project that was done or something that was progress that was made towards one of the goals and is impacted, then we're going to try and list it on here and show that, hey, we're making progress, the city's achieving and growing and doing things that all of you and many others have voiced concern or identified as goals in these plans. And so that's the goals page. And let me shift back here to my main presentation. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, kind of described, we're trying to do some goal tracking for city and partner projects. So I didn't mention the partner project, but if UDOT, for example, comes in and some of the goals that were identified, hey, this street has traffic. Can we study it? Can we try to do some traffic calming, slow the speeds? Early on in a couple meetings last year, I mentioned that with our city engineer, he said, well, the real struggle we have with some of these goals is we may not have jurisdiction over an improvement on a particular roadway. That may be a UDOT facility, right of way, and not a city right of way. And so I think part of our identification and also this goal tracking and future review of these goals is to say, hey, we are not, the owner of that right of way, but can we work with UDOT for their future improvements to identify goals and work with these stakeholders, if any other stakeholders. Sometimes that's the trail. Maybe it's with MAG, Mountain Lion Association of Governments, the regional planning, to identify and intersect that process and say, hey, guess what? We have some neighborhood plan that identified this goal and this goal and this goal. And so that associates with partner projects, if there's a UDOT project or, for example, the pedestrian bridge that just opened up that connected, UVU to across the freeway. I think there's, in our most recent plan that obviously was already being built, but in the discussions with the advisory committee last year, that was part of the discussion. So how can we work with UVU as a partner? How can we work with UTA as another partner to really optimize that pedestrian bridge in different ways? And then, so that's one item, goal tracking. Continued goal review. So, we've got these neighborhood plans present as part of project approvals, future master planning, and other city projects. So we're bringing them up and referencing them, referring to them. Capital improvement project prioritized goals. I mentioned that already, that we're trying to see how we can prioritize those in different ways. And then I mentioned before this goals website improvements. So trying to make it an easy interface, easy to access, easy to understand for any resident in the city to say, hey, this is where I live. This is my goal. This is my goals. And this is how they can almost, find those and take ownership in those, even if they weren't part of the process, so many of them maybe have moved into Orem since then, and they want to know how they can make Orem better. And what better way for them to say, hey, this is the neighborhood plan that your neighbors spend extra time going through and developing this, for them to be able to find those goals and find commonality in some areas to take ownership. And then finally, updates. So updates, I say literally. So what we haven't really thought this through yet, because we just finished it last year. We're really trying to focus on this implementation phase as a phase that will start and then continue. And then we're kind of trying to develop ideas of what does the updates to the neighborhood plans look like next? Is it a major update similar to a general plan update that we do kind of over a longer period of time? Is it a smaller update that we do sooner? That is, not as intensive of a time process that takes 7-8 months to do, have lots of meetings. But I would say the first minor update that we are going to do to the plans is this 2020 census update. So in this fall, the 2020 census data will be released sometime this fall. And we intend to go through each neighborhood plan and rerun all the demographic information for each neighborhood plan. And that's really important because, especially for last year's plans and the year before's plans, we were really kind of, at that 9-year, 10-year gap of census data. And cities change quite a bit, especially Provo-Orem. We're one of the fastest growing metro areas in the country. I think the fastest growing metro area in the country. And so with so much change happening, we really wanted to say, have that be the first update and say, hey, here's the comparison from 2010 to 2020. Now, sure, there's periodic American Community Survey is in between the census survey that is done, but it's a smaller sampling and it's not as robust as the census data. So we're really kind of focusing on that this year, and next probably to be up finally pushed through next year once the data is released and we have a chance to go through it and really apply it to each neighborhood and have that comparison. So hey, here's the original plan. Here's the 2020 census demographic update, and what changed. The other item that we see kind of maybe connected to the neighborhood plans right away, and part of this implementation phase, and then also for future updates is if you were involved in the first neighborhood plans, I say first, the ones that began 2015, 16, 17, we had in the past a thing called Orem Forum, where people could be notified about opportunities to take a survey, participate. Last year, we made some changes, and we're rebuilding that to something that's going to be maybe a little more outward facing and have some connectability to hopefully more residents, and also trying to embed some survey capacity into that, so we can do some neighborhood surveys at a smaller scale, hopefully targeting maybe even some of the goals, right? Or some of the visions of the neighborhoods, or maybe there's a specific intersection. Hey, we're going to identify that intersection that was picked out as hey, there's a lot of issues here at this intersection. Can we put some crosswalks in? Well, maybe we could do a survey of the local residents that live near that intersection, in addition to if it's close to a school. Because that was a really common thing that theme that we saw in the neighborhood plans, was a lot of the intersections near some of these schools were, hey, can we get a crosswalk here or here? So do we reach out to UDOT as a partner? Do we reach out and have that be as part of the survey? The school have survey some of the parents of the students of the schools and the students themselves. So there's lots of things that we can think of. In the past, I was part of an organization where we did neighborhood walks, and we would go to and have someone from the neighborhood be an organizer and pick a topic and just walk around your neighborhood and focus on that topic. And that topic could be any one of these goals. That topic could be, hey, here's the historic orchards that used to be here in Orem. Hey, here's this busy road. How can we, whatever the topic could be, any number of things. So that's one of the ideas, is to COVID kind of made that a little more complicated, but hopefully we can get back to activities like that very soon. And that is one of the first ideas, to connect with you all as neighborhood commission, invite planning commission, invite city council, invite members of potentially of some of the city departments, and go on a neighborhood walk and connect, to invite people from the neighborhood and say, hey, come walk. And that could even be done in conjunction with something that already happens. So we already have the police picnics. So right before the police picnic, there's a walk, and it ends at the police picnic. And so there's really a lot of, I think, some of these ideas that create this opportunity for residents to continue that involvement that we saw, that was so much part of this neighborhood plan building process and implementation and adoption, was that this is all because of the residents that came out and were part of this process. And so we want to really continue that involvement. And so that was one of the things that we've identified. I don't have it on this list here just because that's one idea. There's many more ideas, and that I'm sure all of you have as well. So Any questions? I think that's just kind of maybe as not as brief as I thought, but I tried to keep it slightly brief. But like I said, there's some information I added on in there just to kind of show, hey, this is where you find information. But any questions for me about the plans? I can't speak to maybe some of the early plans because I wasn't here, but I really try to take my best shot if there's any specific questions for any of the plans or process for me right now. I should leave that up though if you have any questions.
I was wondering if you could, with the legislation that kind of changed this with the accessory apartments, can you tell us how you think that might change the plans, or what impact we should maybe?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that briefly. We've had one update from, we're all part of members of a local chapter of planning groups, and they've done a webinar on that specific bill. Talking with Jason, he's not able to make it tonight, but we're going to right now just phase in that, honoring and what that law kind of overruled from the city perspective. And so really the major changes that it added was that we can't restrict the size of the apartment. And then we cannot require the extra firewall that that Orem normally did. Many other cities had different requirements. Orem was one of the cities that actually did require an additional firewall requirement for that separation. The connection is still required. The home ownership requirement is still there. And then the other requirement that was interesting that got changed was that there's now, and this is something I'll have to maybe just double check with Jason on this, and I can email all of you some more of these details. But there's a specific thing with the utilities that they aren't required to be separate anymore, but they're actually one utility meter for both the apartment and the main owner. So I think those are the major highlights, but we're required to make an update to our ordinance by October. But we're going to right now, we've already kind of gone to, we're not going to be enforcing our existing ordinance. We're going to be enforcing these new requirements ongoing. But we will be making an update to our ordinance as required. So I think that's the major three or four things, but I will, so that you have them written out, gather those for you all and send a follow-up email to you all. So you have those kind of written out. In addition to a place on our website, because I think there's kind of a combination I saw is, hey, not only will people kind of be like, wait, what's going on with this, but so that it's clear for everyone in the city. So is that good for you, Mark? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Does it make a difference too in terms of them needing to register or the registration requirements that were put in to have
registration requirements that were put in from Orem last year will still be required. That was not a part of the state legislation. It was solely mostly the size, utility separation. I think we're still discussing internally on I know there's a discussion just last week on, we can't regulate the size, but potentially can still regulate how many bedrooms. And so that was something we're still discussing. So that's why I want to get some clarification on the utility and on that for all of you so that you have that in writing. That was a really good question, Mark. Another bill that was, I think, was going to be coming through that kind of impacted planning was noticing. So there's, with some of the newspapers going digitized, they're not requiring newspaper notice anymore. So we're still required to notice public notices and public hearings. It's just how there's some minor changes to that. And then there was a bill that got, that will come back during a special session that has more building requirements, not as many planning changes, but has more really specifics to building design and some of that. So any other questions?
Karen,
I had a question.
Yeah.
It's in the chat. We were talking, some of us were talking about this.
Oh, I didn't see that.
The law talked about parking, right? So,
yes, and I don't believe it changed the parking requirement that we have. I think
okay.
we can still require one parking stall, but that's I'll make a note to double check that as well, just as part of mine.
Grant, that is correct. We still can require. Originally, the bill wasn't going to require an off-street parking, but
right,
by the end,
it did. I know there was a major concern of not just us, but other cities, because that was going to really make things. We already have a hard time with parking for accessory apartments now, and so I know that was a concern of mine as well as others and colleagues of mine in other cities. That have this issue.
That I followed this bill as it went through the session, and I appreciate the work of the elected officials and the Utah League of Cities and Towns, because what we started with and what we ended up with are different. I mean, well, it doesn't. I think everybody came away a bit unhappy, but I think that as a resident of Orem, I think that it had what the legislature done originally. I think I would have been really unhappy. So I appreciate that work, and it is important to have that affordable housing, to have that accessory apartment option. I'm glad that the Utah League of the Cities and Towns and then the staff and elected officials tempered that bill as it came through. Thank you.
That's a great question. And I sorry I didn't open the chat. I meant to open the chat to see if there's any questions that I hadn't seen. Yeah, the accessory apartment was, like Murray said, I think included in every single plan. And as well as this is a separate discussion that hopefully we'll be able to come back and have with all you. In 2019, we had 2 housing charrettes. Or kind of had a little mini housing conference in July, and then we had in the fall a housing charrette with, I think some of you were there. But we're intending to come kind of reconvene and do a refresh of that. Another, I don't know if we would do another charrette necessarily, but another little mini meeting about housing specific to Orem. I have a friend who works in Provo, and their city council was given a kind of a specific housing presentation about housing in Provo, and I just saw that, and I had asked him how that went, and he wasn't in attendance that day, but it kind of piqued my interest in terms of housing was one of the things addressed in all the plans as well is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. So I think that's just so you all are aware that is something we're hopefully to come back to talk with you about, and also have a future meeting about to say, hey, let's talk about housing, what we talked about in 2019, and what can we all work towards specific to Orem. So because that was part of the plans. Yeah.
Grant, can I clarify one thing? You were talking about there's only one utility meter required now. Does that mean that they can share the same air and all that?
From my understanding, yes.
They don't have to have 2 furnaces or 2 air conditioning.
No, and I think if you are an existing accessory apartment, I think you can keep it the same. I think it's for all new accessory apartments. They're not required to have separate units. But new ones, yes, you would only have one, and you would have to kind of share the utilities in that way. So, and I don't know, Stephen, I don't know how that works with our rental licensing, but
yeah, I'll have to read on that. I was understanding that a little different. I was thinking you'd still could have a separate gas or like electric meter, but
we probably have a separate, but that's the hard one. It's that this has made it a lot easier for people.
Well, so then that's kind of the, I guess, part of the discussion is, like Karen said, both groups were a little unhappy, right? One group started with the idea of, I just want accessory apartments to be allowed anywhere with as little as regulation as possible. That's kind of where it started. And then it kind of got pulled back by cities and towns saying, hey, we need to be able to regulate this somewhat. And so then the negotiation began. So the intent of this bill was to allow more accessory apartments with less regulations. That's where it all began. And so so when the bill is finalized and voted and it says this is going to make it easier for people to create accessory apartments, that's what the bill set out to do, and it accomplished to some extent, not as much as they would have liked. So
Stephen, what did they have to give up? I don't see much they had to give up, because
they didn't want
the only thing I see is the parking.
Yeah, they didn't want extra parking. They wanted little to no regulation at all. They wanted it to be allowed in every zone, anywhere in the city. So then it came down to a city has, and I can't remember the exact numbers, and Grant will send out a better summary, but it ended with a city has to allow it in some percentage of their zones. They can't write it out of their zones. They can't say, well, accessory apartments aren't allowed anywhere. But again, initially they wanted it in every zone, no questions. But then it got down to, well, in some zones. College towns came in and had even more exceptions because of the nature of a college town, which, to be honest, this bill doesn't impact us near as much as it does some other cities. There were some other cities that wanted to stay single family homes, no accessory apartments, and that isn't going to work anymore.
And because we are a college town, I was going to bring that up. We are in that special kind of, we already have this overburdened need of, or I'd say demand is the right word, demand for accessory apartments because of these students. And so, so that was an additional kind of, as Stephen mentioned, outcome of that negotiation that happened is within a certain percentage, we can meet that threshold of the new requirement for the state law. Then Margaret, I was going to mention, I am going to try and get specific details for that utility question, air question, and some of these other questions. And like Stephen said, write up a summary so all of you can have access to that and help the city get the word out. So
I would just appreciate seeing like the way it's been, the listing of requirements that we've had, and then the way it is now, what's the difference?
Okay, yeah, I think we can do that. I think that'd be really good. That's a really good way to think about it too.
So I don't know how to do the little chat thing. So I just want to, this just sounds like now it's a free-for-all. Number one concern. The other concern is I've got places in my area where they have accessory apartments, and heaven only knows how many people are living there. And even though there is enough room for a couple of cars on the property, the street is lined, one side all the way and the other side part of the way. One time I even had to call the police and say, this just doesn't work. We have one lane. And they did come and they managed to get that knocked back some, but it's starting to creep up again. So do we have no kind of way to regulate how many cars can be at a place?
We kind of enforce right now how many people can be in an accessory apartment based off of the family size and family definition. But if a family owns, if he's a car collector, if they're registered and they're current and they're parked on the public street, I know there's been discussion. I saw Karen's comment. Cities have more latitude and regulate the parking. Something we have been discussing is kind of, hey, in certain neighborhoods where there's, it came up in last year's neighborhood plans around UVU. Hey, is there a parking program we could create? When I lived close to the, forgive me, but I went to the University of Utah. But when I lived up there in Salt Lake, if you lived in an apartment, we lived in an apartment. We only had one car, but every once in a while we may have had a need for two cars, and we would rent a car or we'd use a car share. And so if we wanted to park the extra car, we only had one spot for our apartment in our tiny little parking space that was allocated for our apartment. If we wanted to park in the street, I'd go down to the city parking office and buy an extra permit. And then that was for the areas close to the university where there's higher demand. They actually had this parking program where you had this little placard, and you had one visitor. You could use it for a visitor, and you would give it to them, and they would have it on their little dashboard. And then you had your little parking permit sticker up in your window. And so we have, that was part of discussed with the advisory committee last year for the UVU neighborhoods, is because that's just, they were saying it's just, I can't imagine having, what they were describing. Hey, there's so many students parking here and walking to class, parking here and walking to class. And so we did talk about that as an outcome of, hey, here's a goal, let's work with, I know there's been discussions, that's something I'll follow up on, is I know it's one of our goals in planning is this parking permit program, working with a liaison in the police department to discuss how to go about doing that. And so I don't know if that's something that we say, hey, where are these really hot areas where this is an issue, right? And that's something we go about and say, hey, is that something we do? And my colleague Matt, not to put him on the spot, but he did some parking stuff at Provo City. So we do have some. I'm more mentioning that Matt as a kind of, we do have some expertise in previous cities too of how that works and how we can go about it, and what are the best practices, etc. So I don't know, it is on the forefront of our minds. And I think that's one of the ways that we're hopefully going to be looking to address it. I don't know if there's any, parking is one of the age-old problems for any city is how do you manage it? How do you try to keep it balanced and also enforce it?
Okay,
so
well, just so you know, I don't live in a student area at all. This is a house that has many residents, and
right, and that's what I said. Hey,
everybody's got their own car.
There could be these other hot areas where there's just this huge demand for people to own these extra vehicles. There is a provision in the code that says if they're not registered and they are kind of junk, I use the term junk car lightly, but you can have a car hobby and you can fix up cars, but if you can't keep more than so many cars in your yard or on your property. And that is actually a provision in the code. Our neighborhood preservation, not to necessarily, put pressure on them. They've just been short. They've just said, hey, we can't enforce that as right now because of the current staffing. So that's something else to explore, is kind of readdressing that specific type of violation. And I know Kenneth, and I don't want to keep you all too long, but I know Kenneth said that her and Stephen are going to talk about code enforcement. Maybe that's something that we can bring up later tonight.
Thanks.
So
any other questions?
So one of the things, one of the things that we keep being told with neighborhood plans is we've gone to all this work and then they just get put on a shelf and no one looks at them. And so that's one of the things that Grant and his team, Jason, Grant, and Matt have been working on, is to make sure that they aren't shelved, that we are looking at them. I know the council does look at them, but maybe think of some ways that we can get that information out and let people know what is going on. Those low-hanging fruits, things like that. I think that's some of the things that we're grappling with, is trying to figure out how do we get that information out so people can see that, you know, that things are being done on these plans, that kind of thing. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas around that tonight, or if you want to think about that, and we can talk about that in a future meeting. But that's something that, you know, we want to make sure that these plans are useful and that they're being appreciated by all the hard work that's been done in the neighborhoods. But that's kind of some of the things that we struggle with, is making sure that those plans get done and get taken care of, if that makes sense to everybody. So I don't know if anyone has any ideas around that right now, or if they want to think about that, and we can discuss that at a future meeting.
One thought I've had is that when I've looked at the neighborhood plans, and I haven't looked carefully enough to be considering myself an expert right now, but I was on that planning committee for the first one that got done. And it just seemed like a lot of the stuff that was planned was just sort of general. Oh, we want our parks to look nice and we want our streets to look good. And you know, not a lot of specific, like there's a problem here that needs to be fixed. So I can see from what you showed that there are some areas where that was more specific. So it seems to me like at the beginning of your neighborhood plan, maybe you could list areas that need to, specific things that need to be addressed. And then you could indicate what's been taken care of, so that if somebody goes on to the neighborhood plan, sees specific things that need to be addressed and what's been taken care of, they can at least see what's been done really quickly.
I think that's a really good idea, and I kind of see that maybe as a kind of bridge between the plans that were done and this implementation phase. And what I like your idea of, hey, what needs to be done? That's maybe a future. That's the first update we could do. Is we could say, here's what's been done, here's what needs to be done from the existing plans. And that's what I brought this up earlier, is like, how do we, and this is something maybe I do imagine this as being a future discussion, because it's kind of rhetorical in a sense of, what do we do with these qualitative nature of goals? How do you create categories or areas of focus for these qualitative natured goals? And then how can you link those to what needs to be done? And what is that? That really is kind of this a little bit ambiguous of a natured goal. And in the sense, we all know the best kind of goals have the smarts, you know, there's measurable, there's action towards them, they're you know, and so I think that's a really, I don't know, that's how I kind of, as you were talking, Margaret, that's how I kind of thought about it, is that you could take, hey, what needs to be done, here's what's been done. And as we've talked too internally as a planning staff, we've kind of said, hey, how can we transition and transform these goals and these plans from a typical, I say, 80s plan, because my background in planning, bachelor's, master's degree, studied plans a lot. Typical general plan done before, I say before my time, did sit on a shelf. Did, you know, the plan was done, we referenced it, we referred to it, but it did literally kind of sit on a shelf. And how can we transform these into living documents, living plans, you know, something that's actionable, that continues, but it will still grow, right? It'll still grow and evolve as Orem grows and will grow, and change. And so what I think, I love that idea, and I'm taking notes right now. I love that idea, Margaret, what you said, is just that what needs to be done, you know, and what needs to be done to make our neighborhood safe, what needs to be done to keep our parks great, you know, what needs to be done to regulate parking. So really what needs to be done is a good starting point, and then we can build around that and from these goals that already exist. I think it does, as Kenna mentioned, I kind of encourage a future discussion as well, because I think there's lots of goals in the plans, and we definitely could use your help going through them from your perspective and saying, hey, let's dig a little deeper into some of these.
You know, one thought I would add is, and I agree with where Margaret was coming from there. I think there's a lot of value in the goals that you have identified there and what's completed. I think that's great. You could probably add some element of priority on there too, if there are some that have a little more greater sense of urgency. But one thing I was thinking about the other day is, you know, we see the city and we see our neighborhood through our own perspective. So when we drive around, we look at things that are out of place or misaligned from our life. But one of the things that I learned in the innovation process is you need to put on the perspective of the extreme. And I was thinking, you know, if we looked at our neighborhoods from the standpoint of, I'm a person who's blind, what does my neighborhood need for me to be able to have a situation, or I'm in a wheelchair, or I can't drive. My only means of transportation is something else. That we could maybe look at a series of perspectives that actually allow us to take a whole new look at our neighborhood in terms of making it more livable, more sustainable, more friendly. And I think that could be a really interesting look, instead of just, I mean, all of us kind of share a common perspective, single family homeowner, you know, we all drive cars, we all have similar demographics. It could be interesting to get that different perspective.
Thanks, Mark. I like that. I like that a lot.
That is wonderful. Oh, sorry, Kenna. Can I just add one thing? I actually, when Grant asked about getting information back, I thought, you know, I think it would be wonderful if, I don't know if somewhere you had the emails of those who participated in those neighborhood advisory councils, but kind of building on what Mark and Margaret said, it'd be wonderful to start with those people who were on the advisory councils and send them an email and say, hey, here are the things that were, you know, top identified in your neighborhood that we need to do. Here are some that we've already done, and here are some that are prioritized. I think it would make them be like, this is amazing. We worked hard. Now we're seeing the progress. And I think then you can send out with that, hey, here's the link. Be sure and continue to watch. You know, this is the place, because I just think too many people don't know and don't bother to take the time to go out and search where that information is. And so a simple email, and then hopefully they'll pass that information on to their neighbors and friends and others in their neighborhoods who are searching for similar information, and we can kind of get the word out. This is where you go. This is where you look for good information on what's happening.
I love that, Sunday. Thank you. That's a great idea.
That's great.
Well, so maybe we'll give you all a little bit of an assignment until our next meeting. If you will go read your neighborhood plan for your district. So all of you have one neighborhood plan for your district. That's what these planning districts are. And maybe read through that plan and identify maybe common threads or common needs that you can see would be good for us to address. And then maybe how we could address some of those things. And then maybe look at Grant's, you know, what Grant has presented and see if those have been addressed. And then we can have a future discussion on that. Is that an okay assignment for everyone? I'll give you like a month or two, you know, so it's not tomorrow, so you'll be okay with that. So that would be great. Well, anything else around neighborhood planning we want to discuss tonight? All right, well, thanks, Grant and Matt. That was a great presentation. I appreciate that.
Thank you all for the discussion. It was really, really helpful, informative.
All right, well, we went a little bit longer on that than we expected. So we're going to table our matching grant discussion again until another meeting. And we'd like to move into, because there was some talk around code enforcement around MPU. And so we wanted to kind of make an announcement of how we are making some changes to our code enforcement department here at the city, and kind of get some feedback on that. And then also talk maybe a little bit about parking as well. So I think we had a discussion, I think last time, on reactive and proactive enforcement. And that was a really good discussion that we had. And Stephen, you just chime in on on any of this, if you will. So we have made a decision to move code enforcement out of the police department. So right now, all of our code enforcement is being done through our neighborhood preservation unit, and it's being done by 3 sworn officers and 1 civilian officer. So we have 4 total officers, 3 sworn and 1 civilian that have been working in this program. As you know, our caseloads are high, and oftentimes in the police department, these people that are in this position often get pulled away for other things. And so they're not always being able to focus as much on MPU as they should be, on code enforcement as they should be. And so we have been looking at ways to make code enforcement better so we can address some of these issues. As it's probably the council, Jeff and Brent can probably tell you that, and Mark and former council members can tell you, probably the most concerns that you get is nuisance types concerns, housing concerns, parking concerns, things like that. And so we have decided to move into more of a civilian code enforcement role. And so we will be moving our code enforcement department under our city manager's office and in community services. And we will be an all civilian patrol with help from the police department. So the non-civilians will be doing all non-criminal or code enforcement, and the police will retain criminal code enforcement. There will be a liaison from the police department who will be helping the civilian code enforcement officers when needed. And so we think this is going to be a good thing because these people will be able to really just target on code enforcement only. They won't be pulled away for other things. And we feel like this is going to be a way that we can move into some more proactive approaches to code enforcement in the future. So initially we will probably have 2 civilian code enforcement that will split between the city. Hopefully we'll be adding a 3rd as well. And the 3rd will probably be limited to the CDBG eligible. So the lower income neighborhoods would be their area that they would serve in. So how does people feel about that?
I kind of think that, so let me make sure I got this right.
Okay.
So you're going to have 1 enforcement person for the CDBG area and 2 for everywhere else? Or, because it seems to me that the CDBG areas would need more, not less.
Yes.
But if it's for the whole city, then I guess, 1
right.
in that area would be
right.
more
so
than the rest.
Right now, our code enforcement is doing about 30% of their work in those neighborhoods. So those 6 neighborhoods take about 30% of our code enforcement's time. So we will, that originally we'll have 2, we will hopefully move to 3. But that's kind of our idea. The other thing is it will be, we're looking at a system where it's not so much knock and talk. So you don't have to go to the house. You don't have to put a door hanger on the house. We'll have where it's more desk oriented. So say Murray makes a complaint against the neighbor and he'll send a picture. So through the 311 system, he would send a picture, make that complaint. That would be then assigned to our code enforcement officer who will then send what we would call, we're still working through this, but probably a warning letter. And then, after the 30-day warning letter, then the code enforcement person would go out and see if that had been taken care of or not. If not, then they could send them a citation right there from an iPad or something like that. Or if needed, a police officer would go out with them if they needed to cite them on site. And then we have what we call an administrative law judge process. I think we talked about that before, where instead of going criminal with most of our, especially with our nuisances, we go civilian. And so then there's fines assessed and things like that as well. So did I cover that pretty well, Stephen?
Yeah, I think so. Mark Seastrand asked a question about this. Does this replace the NPU? Yeah, it basically does. Those 3 officers who are currently doing it will be brought into the police department as as police officers, and there will be an addition now of additional civilian employees to work code enforcement. What we've kind of identified, and to be honest, this was actually a former NPU sergeant and the police chief were the ones that came to us with this proposal, with the suggestion of it's just not working, and it's not moving the needle. And it's not because we don't have employees that are well-intentioned that want to do good, but the nature of a police officer, especially at a time where recruitment and staying fully staffed as police officers, is the police officers continue to get pulled off of NPU, and they go onto SWAT for an assignment because somebody's out with, a workers' comp injury, or they go to be a school resource officer because somebody is, on vacation for, just different reasons that the officers keep getting pulled. And there was a feeling that we need 100% dedication to this effort. And the majority of the work doesn't have to be done. I mean, I say this, and it's not as extreme as I'm going to make it sound, but we don't need somebody with a gun to show up to somebody's house to let them know that their weeds are too tall. We don't need somebody with a gun to show up to say there's an abandoned vehicle in your backyard that needs removed. What at least a large number will respond, and this is based off of conversations that Kenna and others had with other cities that do this civilian, is not everybody, but when somebody gets the letter saying, we know about it, the issues at your property, and here's pictures, and you have 30 days or you're going to be cited and have to appear before an administrative law judge, some number of people will take care of the issue. And what other cities are saying is it's a relatively high number of employees that are people that will take care of the issue. If they don't, then we'll move forward with, again, if necessary, sending an officer to their home to let them know that, hey, we're serious about this, it needs to be resolved. So then the thought was, well, if we could just get to, more letters and emails and different methods of communicating the issue, we can send 100 emails in the time that we can send, we can get to 10 doors where we knock and try to talk to the property owner. So this is also, enhanced by our requirement of all utilities being in the name of the owner. The city now has the email addresses for every property. Essentially, I mean, there's still a few that need to do this, but essentially we now have email addresses for every property owner, so we can send these electronically. And so we're looking at trying to change the system, not just add more resources to a system that isn't working well. Let's change the system, get the system right. The other thing, just speaking dollars and cents, is a civilian employee versus a police officer comes at, truthfully, probably 40% less money. Police officers, sworn officers, have a different retirement system, different salary ranges, and it's significantly more expensive to have police officers doing, especially the administrative type work, than it is other employees. The other thing is, what we're specifically looking at, we've been looking close with our legal department, is we want people that have some type of a legal background. It's a paralegal or something, but somebody who knows how to put together cases, and they know how to write up citations. They know how to write up these issues. And there's people that are trained in that. And there's some people in the city that I think are already interested, as the word's gotten around that we're moving this way, that I think will do great work in coordinating with our legal department and our police department to make sure that not only are we addressing the issue, but we're addressing it in a way that the case is going to be solid. And as it goes through the system, it'll make its way through the system. And what needs to happen will happen, because we have people that are trained in putting together cases, and they're not being pulled off to other assignments. So long-winded answer, I know, Mark, but that is the direction we're looking at going.
Well, I'll say, actually, I'm a 90-10 on this. I think it really is a good move given the current circumstance, with the challenge of finding police officers, keeping them focused on the things police officers need to do from all that standpoint. The one area that I always appreciated with the NPU was that when they would do the knock and talk for some of these issues, there was usually more than just long weeds and an abandoned car. They would usually find these are the same houses that have drug activity or have some other activity going on that the police officer could pick up on and take action on. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that. My thought is that when you do the emails and the letters, you'll take care of one of the problems, but you may not always see the secondary or the third problems. It may even be more of an impact. But as long as you've got that avenue, that if the civilian can see that, hey, there's more to this property address than just the weeds, and can get the support from the police, then I think it's fantastic.
That's a great point, Mark. Actually, honestly, had something that we haven't discussed as much as is the what are we going to find secondarily and thirdly and such. Now what the police department is going to supply is a dedicated liaison to this group, where we have an officer that we will work through when there's an issue. We would call officer so-and-so, and they would be the one that addresses it. So we're not trying to track down an officer that's willing to help. There's going to be one that's dedicated. One other change that I think actually that's a big part of this, which is going to help significantly, is our NPU has always been in charge of abandoned vehicles. And so you had 3 officers patrolling the whole city for abandoned vehicles. What the police department has worked out is that's going to go back to our patrol that are driving the streets every day. And what they will be the one assigned these abandoned vehicles. And so you're looking at an officer having 2 or 3 vehicles that they're in charge of at any given time, instead of 3 officers being in charge of 250 or, whatever that number is. So I appreciated the police department thinking through that one. That I think will help as well.
I have I like this because what I see it as is a hybrid. When I remember when code enforcement was the lowest paid, newest person in the community development departments. You come out of college and planning, and they put you in code enforcement, and that was, and having my background in planning, that was, I've never applied for those jobs, but. And then it went over to the idea of the police, because you would have this 20-something-year-old college graduate standing on the front porch telling somebody that they need to cut their weeds, and it got kind of dicey sometimes. So
are you
what I like is
the green lawn lady?
What? Oh, yes. And so what I mean is when they went the other way, and I think that at that time it served its purpose. But what I really like here is it's a hybrid. We now have other technologies. We have an administrative law system right now that we didn't used to have. You have all the email addresses. You still have a police department liaison for the ones that are a little more intimidating than somebody who's a civilian. But I like the direction that it's going, and I like what's come out of this.
Well, one of the other things too, Karen, and I appreciate you sharing that insight, that I think is really going to be helpful here is this is going to be positioned very, very likely under Kenna. And one of the things that we all like about that is, as somebody, there's some people that we're going to go to, and the issue is they're lazy, or they just don't want to put in the resources to clean up whatever the issue is. That is some part of it. But there's also issues where it's a single mom who's overwhelmed with life and they're just struggling to keep their head up. There's also seniors, there's also mental health issues. Working under Kenna, the great thing about that is we run into those issues, and there's a direct line to the person who knows more than anybody in the city about how to resolve those issues too. If there's a single mom who's struggling to keep their yard up, they're probably struggling with keeping food on the table. They're probably struggling with keeping a lot of other things. And we don't want to make sure we're just only worried about their yard. We're worried about them and their life and their kids and their family. And Kenna, through our community development block grant funding and her work with nonprofits, namely through that program, is going to connect people into the things that they really need to elevate their life, not just their yard.
Stephen, can I ask something?
Yeah.
That's bothering me. When we talk about emails and statements and stuff like that, it's very impersonal. It's very in your mail. We've got a picture here. Where is the personal? Where is the place for a neighbor to call and just say how they're feeling? Are you allowing that? Because sometimes this just feels like it's gone. And how is Ken ever going to know about the single mom when we're just sending an email giving them a bill?
Yeah, good question. The initial contact is not a bill, it's not a citation, it's just a letter saying we're aware of this issue. Ken and I were talking about this today of what's the body of that email going to look like, or that letter, and that will be something that has a personal touch of, hey, we recognize that there may be other challenges that's prohibited. If that's the case, contact us and let us know how we can help or what those issues are.
Okay, so there is an invitation to contact.
Yes, absolutely. We want to get there before we want to do citations. Again, everything is about is just compliance and helping them figure that out. The other thing is, I won't discount that there is going to be the loss of some personal touch. I know that's true. Hopefully we'll reduce it. We'll keep as much as we possibly can, but it's just the personal touch comes at a sacrifice of getting to 20% of the cases that you could get if you weren't talking to everybody at their doorstep and working through that. So that's the sacrifice there of, do we try to work through a lot more of these issues in a city where neighborhoods are aging? That's the trade-off. That's the debate. I'm not going to suggest that this is going to be as personal as it was before. However, it may come at there may be a benefit to not trying to make everything personal initially, but working with those that need a personal touch.
But I think the other thing is the police liaison will probably be assigned some of the neighborhood stuff that we've been doing with the police. And so that police liaison we'll be working with schools, we'll be working with neighborhoods, we'll be working with each of you, to make some of that, we find out those things. We find those things out from the principals. We find those things out about these families that are struggling, that we can help them.
Great. Yeah, Ken, I think for that. I think one other thing too that's important, and there's other things that have been kind of going in place that's actually making this feel a little more, little better than maybe it would have, 6 months ago. We've used our community development block grant money to purchase a trailer that we can pull that has tools, has lawnmowers, has rakes, has everything we would need to do to clean up a property. But Kenna has also implemented in the city, and we've used it multiple times now, what we call just preservation team projects. And what we've wanted to do with our employees is get them out in neighborhoods, get them out to see just challenges that are happening. And I'm not talking about just police officers or code enforcement officers, but IT employees or employees in fire, employees in wherever. And so what Kenna has arranged is every now and again we run into an issue that is something that is going to be difficult for somebody to take on their own. And Kenna has organized preservation team projects where we will shoot an email out, employees will work with their supervisor, and they'll spend a half a day doing a service project for a widow in the city that needs help getting a tree trimmed back and a yard kind of brought up to a standard that's easier to maintain. So having this under Kenna and her group allows us to start aligning all of those resources and letting them all work together to this idea of, safe and family-friendly neighborhoods.
I really love this idea. It sounds like it will be so much better than it's been. I have a question though. Is this all going to be based on people calling in, or these people are going to go out and find addresses or whatever and then send them an email?
So yeah, a little bit. But we'll still continue to receive, but we will be moving to a proactive effort as well, where especially those neighborhoods where we know there's challenges, we know there high percentage of rentals. And I only say that meaning we know that they have some of the qualities of a neighborhood that may be more prone to these challenges. We'll be proactively going through those neighborhoods as well.
Okay, great.
How are we going to let the city know about this? What's the communication plan? And do your code people, do they have a shirt that they wear that identifies them or anything like that?
Yeah, they'll still have a uniform of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Margaret, you'll know probably when you get your warning letter in your mailbox. I'm just kidding.
You knew what I was thinking. Oh.
No, we'll communicate it through all of our channels for sure. You know, in fact, because it was brought up in a budget presentation, Janelle's working on a story right now for the Daily Herald that's going to start talking about some of these changes. But we'll definitely be communicating those. One of the things that we've been talking about too is, and I'm still thinking about this from 2 meetings ago when Mark Seastrand brought up the idea of really trying to align some of our proactive efforts around our cleanup times where, hey, we're going to be proactive, but we're also there's dumpsters available throughout the city where you can go throw your, start kind of getting into that effort. So our idea is not to catch anybody. Our idea is just to help and improve the neighborhoods. Murray asked if this can be talked about yet. I think so. Kenneth, if you would agree. I think there's still some details we're working out, but the idea of moving to a civilian dedicated code enforcement effort, we can talk about.
I have another question just for the committee members. How are you communicating to your neighborhoods? How are you talking to your neighborhoods? I felt a little bit inhibited as far as anything that I can actually do proactively. Like, can I put something on my Facebook and say, everybody in these 3 neighborhoods, just wanted to let you know that I represent our area on this committee. And if you have anything you want to talk about, I'm here for you. Can I do that? I felt like maybe we're not supposed to do that. So just give me some direction.
I think it's kind of up to you what you'd like to do, because we are really trying to get away from the neighborhood chair idea, where you're representing individuals or things in the neighborhood, more of an overarching issues in your neighborhood. But if you feel like in get those issues, if that's something you would like to do, I think that's
the problem. Yeah.
Right.
Margaret, what I've done is there's some local, like they're kind of sorted by church congregation, and there's some that I belong to. And I just said, hey, I serve in this capacity. Do you have concerns that you want me to pass on at a meeting or pass on to the city? I don't want to take a leadership position, but what I found was people were glad just that there was a human in the neighborhood.
Exactly, a human being
on to the city. They felt like,
I don't see that as a problem, but I felt like it was you're feeling like it's a problem. You don't want somebody to actually tell people that you're doing this. Ken, how many emails have you received to this neighborhood email that you set up?
I received 1 so far.
Yeah, that's
yeah. We did, on our neighborhood page, we did put all your names and your districts, and we did put your nice information. But
that's good.
We did that.
I just feel like there's not enough people that actually know that that we're even doing this or considering it. So it's just kind of bugging me.
And maybe I
want to do a good job.
Stephen, maybe we could do some communication around that.
I think so, but I think, again, I know it's a little bit of a paradigm shift. For example,
I know it's not the neighborhood chair, Stephen, but I just think they need to at least know a way to make their because often you're saying to us, we'll get the opinion of the people in your area, and then you're saying, but don't tell them that you're doing this.
No, we have no idea, no issue with you telling people. But I think of it like we have a transportation commission, and people don't email the transportation commission to ask them about what we're doing about a specific road. We go to the transportation commission with big ideas about how do we address these bigger issues and these bigger problems. Nobody knows who's the transportation commission, but they serve a great purpose of giving us great feedback on specific challenges like moving, like speed limits, like, various things. So yeah, there's no issue with you. I don't have any issue if somebody on the transportation commission tells people they're on that. I don't have any issue with anybody saying that they're on this and to work, they want to talk to you about those things. But this is just, again, is always intended to be a high level. We just want to talk about neighborhood things that we would need to address citywide with the perspectives of various neighborhoods participating in that discussion.
I get this, but I'm getting mixed messages a lot just when we have the meetings. Because then you'll, oh, I need to let your people know, or if people ask you about this, well, how do they ask me if they don't know I'm even doing anything?
Yeah.
And that's fine in my own little neighborhood, but down at Cascade, you know, unless they know actually that I'm representing that area,
yeah,
they're not going to talk to me. It's frustrating to me a little bit.
Those are good points, Margaret. I think we're still trying to figure out all this because it's new and not, you know, and we need to probably look into that a little bit more, not, you know, depending on what you guys are feeling. We just don't want you guys to be burdened, you know, like you're more of an advisory commission for us and more of an advisory council. So we just don't want you to feel burdened by getting neighborhood calls about your neighbor next door who's not maintaining their yard, that kind of thing. So I guess we just have to find a happy medium between what that means.
I was getting those before I was on this.
Yeah, I get just average.
I got them before I was on the city council. I don't know if I just have like a complaint face or something.
You have that taking care of.
Call me Karen. Well, it's because and so I just pass the things on because I certainly don't want people to think that I'm taking the place of an elected official or I'm a neighborhood chair or anything like that. I'm there to help support my neighborhood and trying to figure that out, how to best do that.
Right, and I think, I mean, if there's communication that needs to be had, I think that we as a city can communicate those things. So like with this neighborhood program, this neighborhood change with MPU, that will definitely be communicated citywide. Some of these planning things that we've been talking about, those will be communicated as well. But, you know, we can keep this discussion, you know, we can keep discussing this and see how we want this to go. Like, because I said this is it's a paradigm shift. It's a little bit new to us. So, you know, making that work for us. But you guys are all in different, you all come from different perspectives, different neighborhoods, different kinds of neighborhoods that you're in. So I think, you know, you have a good perspective, at least an overarching perspective of what is going on with your neighbors. Maybe not a full perspective, but I think you have a good perspective. I don't know if that's helping you at all, Margaret.
Well, it's just, I like I told you, I'm getting mixed messages a lot with the things you say. And then I think, well, how am I going to do that if I'm not even allowed to tell people I'm doing it? So that's the question.
I think it's, you know, my biggest concern is I just don't want you guys to I don't want you to be neighborhood chairs and getting phone calls every day. You know, that is my biggest.
Well, I used to be a neighborhood chair and I sure didn't get phone calls every day.
Okay.
No.
Well, I think what the other thing we're wanting to make sure is that this commission is we're able to really kind of focus on, like we've done tonight, these higher level discussions, and it doesn't turn into, you coming with a list of, hey, here's 5 properties that neighbors told me about need cleaned up. Not that we don't want to know about those properties, but this hour isn't the time to go through those. And so that's what we're trying to balance. And that's what the neighborhood chair program had become, is just, hey, I got 5 properties and they're usually close to my house because that's all I really knew. And they all need cleaned up. And we wanted to elevate the discussion with our neighborhood.
So I remember when we used to get notices in our city bill, and maybe I'm so negligent about looking at my bill, and I actually get a paper bill, so I would see it. But, you know, there were those things that everybody got that there could be a communication in. So if you wanted to let people know about this new community thing, that might be something that people would notice more than, you know, who is going on the city website to see what's cooking? Not that many people. And so, you know, there needs to be something where everybody's going to get the notice or the opportunity to see it, to let them know what they can be doing to participate, or what's going to be happening in their neighborhood to make it better. So just a thought.
And one of the things that we have done is in the city newsletter, we have implemented what we call the neighborhood corner, where we're doing neighborhood specific things. But we could beef that up definitely. Any more thoughts on that?
I'll jump in here just randomly. I mentioned that Orem forum. We're still trying to get some ideas of what it's going to become and what we'll use it for. But one idea we have thought of is it's greater than just a survey tool and kind of here's a upcoming project. But and I've briefly talked to Stephen about this and Jason, but is it a greater community engagement tool that we could use it for? People could opt into for more than just, hey, here's this planning project or here's this transportation project, but kind of a one-stop source. But right now it's still kind of a planning idea. Hey, Orem Forum, it's a forum for learning about these projects, but that's just one concept we've thought of. If it is bigger, then it would take longer to build and implement, and we wouldn't want it to replace anything. That's the hard part. So just something that's, I've been listening, and I'm interested to listen to these discussions too, because it's helpful from a planning staff to know how we can engage with the residents as well for all the different types of projects that we have. So something that I thought of to add, if anything.
Thanks, Grant. One of the things that I think would be something that was said tonight about, different things that have been going on. Like, I think as neighborhood leaders, and we encourage our neighborhood leaders to do this as well in our neighborhood leader meetings, but, I think reporting is key, so if you have an issue in your neighborhood that you're aware of, or, you drive past that house every day and the weeds are clear up to the, your face or whatever, it'd be good for you guys to report that to our 311 system, because we like, so that we can know what's going on. Like Jana, like, if you have too many people living in that house next door, you can report that anonymously and we could check that out, that kind of thing. I think reporting is an important piece of making sure that these neighborhoods get better in the future. So well, any other, we're about an hour and a half in, so it's probably time to let you go eat dinner or something. Are the Jazz playing again tonight? It seems like they play every night at my house.
Tomorrow night.
My dad watched.
Tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m.
1 p.m. today, huh?
1 p.m. tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. Okay. So does
on a Friday? Wow.
Yep.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to discuss tonight?
I'll throw out one idea for you, Kenna, if you're open. I have, can anybody guess where I took my picture for my background?
Looks like a park in Orem.
Nielsen's Grove.
It was the middle of the parking lot by UVU. And I lately I've been interacting with a lot of people from around the world. And I realized that instead of showing a virtual backdrop of some office, I ought to be showing them what an incredible place we live. And my thought was with Zoom now and Teams and these other things that allow you to drop in some virtual backgrounds like what you've got, Grant, I thought, God, what if we did some type of a photo competition or contest for virtual backgrounds that highlight just what a beautiful place we live, and puts a little positive spin on the different neighborhoods or different parks or different areas. So, and maybe you could tie that to the spring cleanup, that there's a, once you're done cleaning up, take a picture of your surroundings or something that makes it kind of fun. Just a thought. Oh, and then on the website, make them available for public to download and use. So, so we can really enjoy the beauty of this great spot.
That's a cool idea. I have no idea how you got that there. I keep wondering how people have all these things behind them.
We can show you, it's easy.
Marcus, cool idea. We had talked about outside the 311 center, we had 2 just simple poster frames up for the census. Just as people came in and paid their bills, hey, remember to take the census last year. and we still got them. And so Pete and the city manager's office, we had actually talked about this idea of an open photo contest.
Yeah.
The winner would have their photo printed and hanging in the city center. However, there's the construction right now, which not as many people will probably want to go there and stand. So maybe it's in the library is a better spot now to where we could have that hanging. So just to tail off your idea, that's connection. So
good.
And then I just wanted to add, as we end up, we had an amazing meeting about the Hillcrest Park, but before that, there were a bunch of surveys and a bunch of communication. And it astounded me, all the people that were willing to communicate, and most of it over email and other, modern technologies. And I just think as the city utilizes email to reach out and do these surveys and even let us know the responses to the surveys, what people liked. I was recently reading an article in the Herald that included some of the responses to the latest survey on, the care money and the parks and how to use that. And I thought, I love hearing back. I want to know more about what these results are. And I think as people hear too, they're kind of like, oh, I forgot to take the survey this time. Next time I'm going to be sure that I do it, because I want them to know that I do support the dog park, or I do support a splash pad, or I do support whatever. And, just as we use, emails and some of this modern technology to communicate what policy is doing, and really appreciate things. And then know too how to, be a voice and be heard when they observe needs.
Sunday, that's great feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Sunday. I love that.
Well, maybe I'll just tell you about a few things just to keep on your radar. First of all, our Property All-Star program is underway. So I don't know if some of you do know about that, but we implemented, it's not like the beautification committee. So beautification committee gives awards for people that maintain their houses, like my dad, who you could measure his grass, I think, with a ruler, and they'd all be the same. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people who may have had a bad yard or a bad home that has now cleaned it up more to a community standard. But we have what we call the Property All-Star program. So if you come across anyone that may have done that in your neighborhoods, or you've seen that around, you can look on our neighborhood website and nominate people for that. But we're not looking for the best yard in the neighborhood, but maybe the ones that have cleaned it up. We've been able to give a few awards, and that has been a really good thing. So that's just something to put out there. That information is on the neighborhood website. And we do have some neighborhood leader meetings coming up. So if for Angela's neighborhood, it's next week, next Wednesday at 6:30. It will be on Google Meet. So if anyone wants to attend that. And then we will have the Hillcrest neighborhood leader meeting Sunday in May, on May 12th. And then what we do is we do neighborhood leader meetings in our 6 eligible neighborhoods, our 6 low income neighborhoods. And then we do one citywide neighborhood leader meeting every year. And that will be in September 8th. And we assume that they'll all just be on Zoom or on Google Meet as well. It's just,
what does that mean, neighborhood leader? What are you describing?
Yeah, so what we have done is we include faith-based leaders, community leaders, former neighborhood chairs, just people that are known as leaders in their neighborhood. So someone like Karen, who prior to even being a councilwoman, people came to, many of you are all of you are neighborhood leaders in your neighborhood. But we just encourage neighborhood leaders to come. We don't want it to be a neighborhood meeting where it just becomes a complaint fest, but something positive where we're able to share about neighborhood plans, we're share about our rental licensing program. The NPO officer or a police officer, whoever, a code enforcement officer shares about nuisances and crime in those particular neighborhoods that we're talking about. And then we're able to provide neighborhood resources. So we do mention you guys in those meetings that we do have this neighborhood commission. But, you know, we talk about our neighborhood website, our resident resources website. We talk about our down payment program, our home improvement program. So these are people that get information out into the neighborhoods. A lot of them are faith-based leaders, but you know, that's what we have here in our community, and that's very helpful. Read Spin to One. I think some of you.
Murray's,
yeah.
Murray's been to some. I think one of the things, I mean, Ken, a lot of times the makeup is, you know, principals of elementary schools,
right.
elders quorum, release society presidents, pastors of churches, you know, somebody from the Catholic Church has attended. And these are people where we're saying, listen, if you have somebody in your, you know, if you have a senior in your neighborhood that you know about who's got a roof that needs repair, here's a grant program and they're low income. If there's, you know, we're trying to actually get the resources to the person who will likely be the person who talks to the individual in need. And so this is really trying to equip those in neighborhoods with the information they need to be successful in their calling, their job, their assignment, whatever it might be.
So we do 4 of those with the neighborhood. We've been combining some of our eligible neighborhoods just to get bigger response. So we do one in Sharon Park, one in Hillcrest, and then we combine Stonewood and Lake Ridge and Geneva and Suncrest. We've had meetings in Sharon and Geneva and Suncrest, and Stonewood Lake Ridge will be next week, and then Hillcrest will be in May. And then our citywide meeting is very well attended. When we've done it in person, this is the most well attended, where we've had people from all over the city come and learn about resources and that kind of thing. So that will be in September. So for you that aren't living in eligible neighborhoods, that's a good one for you to attend as well. We also have police picnics this summer. These are also in our eligible neighborhoods. This is where we bring out, well, we brought out our MPU officers in the past, other police, our police chief has come, but they come out with some of our city leadership. Our mayor usually comes, and we have a picnic. We have Wiener Schnitzel hot dogs and, you know, chips and drinks. We have games for the kids. Miss Orem and her royalty come out and play with the kids. And this gives you an opportunity to meet your leaders. It gives you an opportunity to meet your police officers. You can share your complaints, your feelings. And it's also, sometimes you can meet your neighbors. It's amazing, especially with the prominent religion we have here. If you're not a member of that religion, sometimes you may not even know who your neighbor is. And we've seen some really good positive things happen at these police picnics with neighbors. So we used to do these in Provo when I worked in Provo, but we had a neighbor. I'll just kind of give you this kind of a fun story. We had 2 neighbors, and they were the one neighbor was constantly calling the police on the other neighbor because of their dog. And they had never met before. They met at a neighborhood leader meeting, and the police calls stopped because now they could communicate with each other. You know, and we've had that happen in some of our police picnics. It also helps break down the barriers for minority residents. A lot of them are timid to come to those, and we always have Spanish speakers at the police picnics, and it's been fun to watch the diversity at these picnics, especially in our low-income neighborhoods, and the opportunity to meet the mayor, the opportunity to meet our council and meet our police officers. They've been very beneficial. So we do those in our eligible neighborhoods. We weren't able to do them last year because of COVID. So we're hoping we can do them this year, but we'll be doing 4 this year. The Sharon Park will be our first one. And I can send this all out to you, or it will be in our minutes as well. The Sharon Park will be July 14th at Sharon Park. Then we'll have our Geneva and Suncrest at our Geneva Park. This one will be really fun. We have a futsal court that we built with the Real Soccer Foundation about 2 years ago now. They're going to come out and do a soccer clinic with the kids. So the Real players will come out that night and do a soccer clinic with the kids when we're having our picnic. The Stonewood and Lake Ridge one will be August 11th at Westmore. And then the Hillcrest will be August 25th at Hillcrest. So those are fun. And those are, you guys want to come out to those. I always have fun when I'm there. And Wiener Schnitzel hot dogs are pretty good. So,
so you didn't say the date for Geneva.
Geneva is July 28th. Sorry, Jana.
You know what? I'm not even gonna be here probably.
Darn it.
Oh, maybe 28th. Yeah, I should be back.
Okay, great. So we would like to invite you out to those as well. Just remember, we have our neighborhood website. It's orem.org/neighborhoods. And then we also have our resident resources page. So that's on orem.org. And I think it's resident resources. We implemented this because of COVID, but I think we'll continue. But it breaks down a lot of the resources in the community. So if you run into a neighbor, friend, someone that is in need of a resource, this is a good place to start looking at resources as well. So any other questions, comments? Well, we really appreciate your opinions and your perspectives. I think it really helps our planners. It helps us as city staff to know that we're going in the right direction. We will, Margaret, try to figure it out a little bit better on what the direction is and how we want you to participate. But we do appreciate that all you do. Any other concerns or problems that we can address tonight? Okay, well, we'll let you go eat some dinner then. So,
you guys.
Yeah,
great meeting.
And we'll meet again in a couple of months, probably. I'll be in touch. So
Thanks, everybody.
Probably after Summerfest.
Yeah, after Summerfest for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.